Hey, welcome back to our channel. We're in the Rockies, where we want to help you make the most of your vacation to the American West. Today I'm going to be talking about the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. This is really kind of a magical place for a lot of people. I've had a few people on this channel say how much they enjoyed it. I had one fellow named Boris who said that he went to Yellowstone and he can't stop thinking about the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. I've seen some people on YouTube say, is this for real? This is crazy. So people really, this is perhaps the most photographed part of the park, Yellowstone. So I want to really do it some justice here today. I'm going to do my best, muster my storytelling ability and my tip giving ability to help you get the most out of your trip to Yellowstone if you're going to go to the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone sometime soon. So I'm going to cover three things in this video. First of all, what it is. Secondly, the history and importance of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. And then third, some tips for visiting the Grand Canyon. So if you're not interested at all in the first two, then skip near the end and you'll get the tips, okay? Now before I get into it, I would really appreciate it if you'd click the subscribe button and then think about a comment. I really love the comments on our channel. They really keep me going. I'm a teacher, and so I'm used to having some interaction with my students, and it really makes it for me. This YouTube thing's a little hard for me because I don't get that interaction, so I love it when people comment so we can have a little exchange, a little back and forth there. I want to know what you're thinking. And so what I'd like to know is if you've been to the Grand Canyon and what was your favorite part of it. And if you haven't been there, do you have any questions about it? All right, let's get going. First of all, what is it? Well, it is a canyon, obviously, and it's about 1,000 feet deep and about 25 miles long. Now 1,000 feet, when you're there looking over the edge, it seems really deep. It really does. But in terms of other canyons in the Rocky Mountain area in the west, it's not really all that deep. By comparison, the Grand Canyon in Arizona is about 6,000 feet deep. The Grand Canyon is just mind-blowing. Zion Canyon is about 2,000 feet deep in southern Utah. And the Black Canyon of the Gunnison in Colorado is over 2,000 feet deep as well. The Black Canyon of the Gunnison is interesting because it looks very similar to the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, only it's black, different color. So if the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone isn't all that deep by comparison, why does it seem to be so special to people? Well, for one, of course, is the color. I mean, where are you going to see another yellow canyon? It really is. Those yellow walls are really quite stunning. And it's not just the yellow, there's also red mixed in with it. The red color is iron, and it's really rusting. What it actually is doing is kind of rusting the walls. And so it's got this yellow mixed with red, and then the walls steam. The walls are steaming because there is geothermal activity underneath going on. You know, of course, Yellowstone is a volcano. Yellowstone is actually a volcano. That's the crazy thing about Yellowstone. People don't really think, even when I used to hear that Yellowstone's a volcano, what does that even mean? Well, it's like you're standing in the middle of a volcano. Normally you would think of volcanoes have a little spot at the top that you can stand in. Well, Yellowstone's so big, it's such a big volcano, it's basically the lower loop is that cone that you would normally stand in. So you're really kind of standing in a volcano, so if it goes off someday while you're there visiting, then good luck. So anyway, there's geothermal activity going on underneath, and the walls steam, they're red, they're yellow, and then they're all framing this beautiful waterfall, which is about twice as tall as Niagara Falls. So it's really quite a sight. People just absolutely love going to the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. Now let's talk a little bit about how the canyon was formed. It's formed by the Yellowstone River. The Yellowstone River originates from Yellowstone Lake, actually probably even in the mountains before it gets to the lake, but there's this huge lake at the bottom part of the park, Yellowstone Lake, and then it empties into Yellowstone River, which really begins right at Fishing Bridge, one of the sites that you can stop at and see, and it goes up through Hayden Valley, and then forms the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, and it forms two waterfalls, what are called the Upper Falls and the Lower Falls. These are the waterfalls. The Yellowstone Falls is what they are, and there's the Upper Falls and the Lower Falls. And then the Lower Falls is actually the beginning of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, the whole yellow section. And then it meanders on for 20 plus miles. Of course, the river goes all the way up to the Missouri River. That's the interesting thing about the rivers in Yellowstone, is they all flow north for the most part. They flow north until they get to the Missouri River, and then they head east till that reaches the Mississippi, and then they head out the bottom of America to the Atlantic Ocean. So the Rocky Mountains are really like the rooftop of America. Water that falls on one side, on the east side of the Rockies, flows to the Atlantic Ocean, and water that falls on the west side of the Rockies flows to the Pacific Ocean. Yellowstone sits really right at the top of that house, I guess, top of the peak. There are actually parts in Yellowstone where the water flows south to, or flows west to the Pacific River, or to the Pacific Ocean. In fact, you'll see these signs as you drive through the park that say Continental Divide, and that's what it means. It means this is the rooftop right here of the country. Water that flows on one side of the Continental Divide is going to go one way. Water that falls on the other side is going to go the other way. So all the rivers, the Yellowstone River and most of the rivers in Yellowstone flow north. So as you're looking at it, where the Lower Falls comes down, this beautiful Lower Falls, is the beginning of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. And it was the Yellowstone River was able to carve this canyon because the rock was weakened because of that geothermal activity that I mentioned earlier. So it's hot, and it just weakened the rock there, and so it was able to kind of slice this canyon out of the rock. It's fairly young in geologic time. And as I mentioned, there's the two falls, the Upper Falls and the Lower Falls, and I'll talk about how you visit these and how you see them here at the end of the video. One thing I want to talk about first, though, is just, again, I wanted to do this some justice because it's really quite a meaningful site to the national parks and to the American history. So the first Europeans to see the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone were mountain men. These were French fur trappers, some British fur trappers, American fur trappers. These guys kind of frequented the Rocky Mountains looking for beavers and other things to trap. And they went all over the place. And perhaps the first guy to see Yellowstone was a fellow named John Coulter, who was an absolute legend in his day. It's kind of unfortunate that he's been forgotten about. But he was really like the Daniel Boone of the West. And in fact, they call him the first mountain man. He left the Lewis and Clark expedition way back in 1806, meandered through the area. Now they're a little unsure of whether he actually stepped foot in what is now Yellowstone, but he did tell some tales of some steaming vents coming from the earth and stuff, and so people started calling this area Coulter's Hell. Again, it's a little unsure. Historians are split 50-50 on whether Coulter actually came into the Yellowstone and Grand Teton area. There's a whole thing about the Coulter Stone. I'll do a whole nother video on John Coulter, but we do know that mountain man Jim Bridger used to say that you could go to sleep on the edge of the Grand Canyon, and before you go to sleep you could yell your name into the canyon, and you could be woken up by your echo the next morning. Of course, these old timers are prone to hyperbole, but you get the point. He was just saying this was a really deep, amazing canyon. And so these stories of these mountain men were getting out into the public imagination a little bit. And finally, in the late 1860s, so just shortly after the Civil War ended, some people figured out, or some people decided they better start figuring out if these tales were true. These tales of these crazy things coming out of this area were true. Much of the West had been explored by this time, but there were a couple of areas that were really kind of off the map, and this was one of them. And so in 1869, There were 3 guys from Bozeman, Montana who went into Yellowstone. They were really kind of prospecting and looking to see if there was some riches and stuff. And they came out of there with some tales. Yeah, these are true. And so the next year, some more guys from Bozeman, Montana got together and said, hey, we need to go check this out, because if it's true, we might be able to get people to come visit us here in Montana and see this place. They're looking for tourism money. And they did. They went in there and they came out again with stories that, yeah, this is true. All these amazing things in there. There's Yellow Canyon and these geysers going off and stuff, mud pots. And there's a funny story about that group. Is that one of the guys in their group, now these 3 guys actually took a whole team with them to go in there and check things out, and one of the guys got lost. And he was lost in Yellowstone for 37 days and barely survived, and he's got a whole amazing story that I'll tell you about some more. In fact, if you're going to Yellowstone, you may want to consider picking up my itinerary and my audio guide, where I'll have some more of these stories for you. I'm not quite done with them yet, but by the time you see this, I could be done. You can visit our website. I'll put it in the description. Anyway, the next year, 1871, the government, the federal government, actually figured, we better start looking into this and figure out if these stories are true. So they sent a guy by the name of Ferdinand Hayden to Yellowstone, and he was head of the U.S. Geological Survey, and he gathered up a whole team and went out to Yellowstone. They took a train out to Ogden, Utah, where the railroad had just been completed, the Transcontinental Railroad. And he took a bunch of guys up to Montana and they checked it out, up to Yellowstone area. And of course, Hayden Valley in Yellowstone is named after Ferdinand Hayden, the leader of this expedition. Now, why the sudden interest in this area, Yellowstone, after it had just sat there for a long time with a few mountain men coming through? Why suddenly were there people interested in this place? Well, it really comes down to one thing, well, maybe 2 things: the railroad and tourism. The railroad wanted places to take people, because if they could get some people interested in going somewhere, they could build a rail line there. And the thing about the railroad is they didn't have to pay for their rail lines, or at least the land that they laid them on. The government gave them the land for free to build these rail lines. So as I mentioned, the Transcontinental Railroad had just been completed in 1869, connecting the West with the East, connecting the country together. This was a huge occasion, and you can actually go to the place where the rails connected, which is in Promontory Point in Utah. There's a national monument there that celebrates where they drove the golden spike, the last spike, to connect the country east and west. This was huge because it used to take 4 months to walk out, or to ride your horse out west from the Mississippi River out to California. It used to take them all summer long to do that. So now that the rail was out here, the rail line, they figured, hey, every place in the West, just about every place in the country, wanted the railroad to come to their town so they could connect commercially to the rest of the country. And especially the West, because the West wasn't connected at this time. The East was plenty connected. So all these towns like Montana, places in Montana, wanted the rail line there, and they figured, hey, if there's this really cool place that is true, this place that they call Wonderland, if this is actually there, then perhaps we can get the rail line here. So the railroad actually pressured the government into figuring this thing out. The government paid for this expedition. And it's kind of funny because so often we think of commercial interests and the national parks as in opposition to each other. But here, actually, the railroad, the commercial interests of the railroad, built the national parks from its earliest days. They made it possible for people to go visit these places, these remote places out west. It was really, a situation in which they worked together. It really worked out well. Well, anyway, this group here, this expedition that Ferdinand Hayden lined up. He brought quite a few people out here with him, and they decided, of course, that they needed a photographer, somebody to take pictures because if these things were true, they needed to have proof of it. They needed to show it off. People back east just didn't believe that this was the case, and so they said, hey, we need a photographer to go with this. So they brought a photographer named William Jackson, and the thing is, they were a little concerned that his photos might not turn out well. Photography was established by that point, but the equipment was really big and cumbersome. They had these glass plates that they used. They were afraid it was going to break. I mean, he had to ride horseback from Ogden, Utah up to Yellowstone for days and days. I mean, that's a 5-hour drive today, just to drive in the automobile. So they were quite concerned about it. So as a backup plan, they brought an artist named Thomas Moran to paint the stuff that he saw. Now, he wasn't just a backup plan, of course. The photography was done in black and white back then. So Moran, bringing an artist, was a perfect way to deliver the color, the amazing colors of Yellowstone, to the world. And so Moran and Jackson went around together. They kind of formed up a little companionship. They helped each other out. They composed their shots and their art and all that stuff. Really worked together. These guys kind of became pals. The rest of the expedition was concerned that these guys were going to be too soft because they were artists. They weren't really explorers and campers and stuff like that. Thomas Moran even had a pillow on his saddle the whole time because he wasn't used to riding a horse. But they did earn the respect of the rest of the guys of the expedition. They ended up being pretty tough, and they got the stuff done that they needed to. Well, Thomas Moran happened to be in the middle of this little battle for artist supremacy in the nation with a fellow named Albert Bierstadt, who was really kind of the premier landscape artist at the time. And Bierstadt had come over here from Germany and had come out west and painted a lot of paintings of Yosemite and then other places around the west, and had these really kind of dramatic scenes. They're really quite amazing to look at. And these guys ended up becoming part of what is now called the Rocky Mountain School of Artists, or the Rocky Mountain, something like that, Rocky Mountain Artist School. Anyway, these guys had a little rivalry going on apparently, and so Moran felt that if this Yellowstone thing was really true, then he would have an opportunity here to stake his claim to the nation's top artist. Well, after the expedition was over, Hayden went back to Congress and delivered his report and said, hey, this is all true. It's there, and here's the photos and the art to prove it. And before he delivered his pitch to Congress, one of his friends said, hey, you ought to put in there, you ought to tell them to protect this land as some sort of a national park and set it aside for protection so that nobody else can settle it and all that stuff. And so he did. He asked Congress to do that, and Congress was on board with it. Now, this whole idea was mostly new. They had tried it in a way with Yosemite, and in my audio guide, I'll go through all this history about this Yosemite and Yellowstone and the national park structure and all that stuff. But Congress agreed. They passed an act called the Organic Act of 1872 and declared Yellowstone a national park. And this is the world's first national park, not just for the United States, but the world. This is the first instance in the world in which land was set aside for all the people, for the benefit and enjoyment of the people, is what the Organic Act says. And you can find that phrase on the Roosevelt Arch up near Gardner, Montana, at the very top of Yellowstone. The idea was that this was a democratic process of, we're not like Europe, where the rich can buy up all the best stuff and then just keep it for themselves or charge other people these exorbitant prices to see it. No, we're a democracy in America, and we want everybody to be able to enjoy the nation's treasures. So the Grand Canyon, where that comes in here, is Thomas Moran painted this incredible 7-foot by 12-foot painting of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. So after he got back from the expedition, he went to his studio and worked on this masterpiece that Congress saw and liked it so much that they purchased it for $10,000 from Moran, which really kind of cemented him as the winner in this little battle between him and Albert Bierstadt for the top artist in the country. Well, this painting, the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, you take a look at this and it's very dramatic and it's full of color. And you know, the way these guys back then did these paintings, it was kind of like to bring them to life. It wasn't necessarily to provide true realistic representation. I mean, in our day we seem to be kind of concrete thinkers, you know, and we want something to look just like it does in a photo, but that wasn't his purpose. He's trying to convey a feeling of the Grand Canyon. So take a look at this. If you've been to the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, see if this kind of conveys, you know, if you agree with this type of feeling that this conveys. And we could go and we could break this painting down. There's a lot of stuff in this painting, but we're not going to do it in this video. Anyway, really a remarkable painting from a guy Thomas Moran, who became linked with Yellowstone forever. He became known as Thomas Yellowstone Moran, and even when he signed his paintings, he signed them Thomas, T-Y-M, Thomas Yellowstone Moran. So he loved Yellowstone. He came out here one more time about 20 years later and did another masterpiece painting on the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. So he actually did two of these paintings. It's really interesting that he did that, which was even bigger. The second one was even bigger and had more, really, I think, some more dramatic colors. So that gives you a little feel for it, the background and all that of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. And now I want to talk about some of the tips for visiting this place and kind of how it's laid out and where you can go to get some of the best views of this canyon. And for that, I'm going to use the map. I'm going to go to my iPad here and pull up a map and kind of show you where to go, and I'll show you some pictures and all that stuff. Okay, let's cover how to see the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone now. You can see here, Canyon Village sits right here, kind of between the loops. And so if you drive to this intersection here, this is called Canyon Junction, and then you'll go just a little bit south and you'll get to the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. It sits just a little bit north here of Hayden Valley. Let's zoom in on it and see how to do it. Okay, here's an up close of Canyon Village, and I want to show you there are 3 roads, and you really kind of need to be prepared for this. They come at you kind of quickly, so if you don't have a plan or don't know what you're doing, you might get a little confused as you're driving by there. So the first road is North Rim Drive, and this is a one-way road that exits out here at Canyon Junction. And all along this road there's some parking spots where you can take a look at some of these viewpoints. So the first one is this little switchback walk down to what is called the brink of the Lower Falls. So here is the famous waterfall that is the Lower Falls, and as you look this way you'll see the yellow Grand Canyon. This is the beginning of the yellow part of the Grand Canyon. Over here, by the way, is the Upper Falls. So I showed you that picture earlier with the 2 waterfalls there. So this hike here, you can get right down and stand right next to the Lower Falls as they are tumbling off the edge. It's not as popular as some of the others because it's about a 0.8 mile hike, I believe, just one way, and it's very steep, so you're dropping 600 feet, and then of course you're going to have to come out. So be prepared for that if you're going to do it, but some beautiful views there. I've used this little video from the National Park Service. I don't have any video of my own at that spot. The next spot here is Lookout Point, probably the most popular spot on the North Rim side. And when you get there, there are some stairs on that one as well, and there's a couple different spots you can hike down to, and of course you'll have great views of the Lower Falls there and some pretty good views going that way as well. The next spot is Grand View, which again has good views from both sides. Lookout Point, probably a better spot here for you, in my opinion. And then you can come out here and drive down this road, get to this place called Inspiration Point. Notice though there's a bend in the river right here, and so Inspiration Point, you cannot see the lower falls from there. It's really to view the rest of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. So again, be prepared for that. Don't go there thinking that Inspiration Point sounds amazing, but you don't get to see the lower falls, which is kind of the highlight, it seems like, for a lot of people. So that's the North Rim. Okay, the second road is the brink of the Upper Falls right here. And this is a really popular stop because it's just a little short walk out here, and you're standing next to the Upper Falls where they tumble off the edge. And you get these great views this way of the river that's coming right at you, and then it takes a little turn, tumbles off the falls. There's usually a rainbow there that you can see as it's falling. So that's an incredibly popular spot, and there's a couple of different viewpoints on that one a little bit higher, one right next to the water. Really popular. There's some stairs going down to the lower one, but I believe the upper viewpoint is accessible by wheelchair. Okay, then the third one is the South Rim Drive. And the first stop here on the South Rim Drive is Uncle Tom's. The parking lot is actually called Uncle Tom's, but there are a couple of things that you can see from here. So this is quite a big parking lot. There's almost always space to park there. And if you just walk out a short little walk, you'll see an overlook of the Upper Falls, where you just came from. And you'll be able to look across the river and see a very good shot of the Upper Falls falling down. And then if you walk a little bit up this path here, you'll see a sign. And if you look straight across the river, notice this river here is coming down. There's a waterfall there too called Crystal Falls. And so a lot of people miss it. I've missed it many times. And then finally discovered, oh, there's another waterfall over there. And so there's that. And then if you go around this way, I'll zoom in a little bit here, or this way, you can get to this place called Uncle Tom's Trail. Uncle Tom Richardson was the guy that kind of set this place up way back when the park first began. In fact, he would ferry people across the river over here by the bridge here, and then take them down to this very good viewpoint of the lower falls, and he would take them down using ropes and ladders. It was really kind of a dangerous, crazy thing. He got pretty annoyed when Hiram Chittenden decided to build a bridge across that river because Uncle Tom made some money by charging people to ferry him across. But that bridge that you cross over back here is called the Chittenden Bridge, and that kind of took away some of Uncle Tom's income. But anyway, if you go down this path now, there are stairs. You don't have to go down by ropes and ladders anymore. But there are over 300 stairs. So again, you have to be in pretty good shape to get down there and get back up. For that reason, again, not among the most popular lookouts, but it still would be very, very cool if you can do that. Now, you don't have time to do all these really in a day. It would take a long time. I mean, maybe, I guess you could spend the entire day, but that would be kind of your whole day doing these. Usually people will do 1 or 2 spots, maybe 3 spots to look at this Grand Canyon. So you have to kind of pick which one is up your alley. Now, the most popular spot is really probably Artist Point here. Now, of course, it's named Artist Point because Thomas Moran, who we already talked about, as you notice, his paintings of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone really are kind of from this perspective here, this Artist Point, because the river, bends around right here. This little spot, Artist Point, gets you a nice straight shot down the river. Beautiful view of the lower falls. You're kind of far away, so if you have a nice camera, and you can watch our other video on what to pack when you go to Yellowstone, but if you have a nicer camera, one that'll zoom a little bit more, you might get some better pictures, but still, great pictures with your cell phone. Now, when you get to Artist Point here, there are, this again is accessible by wheelchair. There's a little spot where you can walk up the stairs and get a slightly different view, and you can even look back a little bit on this canyon here. But this is a wonderful spot. There's even a little spot there for kids to play in the trees that kind of have like a little cave they can hide out in the trees and play. It's pretty fun. I want to give you 2 ideas for how to improve or how to make the most of your visit to Artist Point, to the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. Number 1 is you want to try to enjoy the moment. So many tourists, so many visitors just go snap a picture and leave, and they're on to the next thing. This is really a spot I think you want to spend some time at and just enjoy it, just kind of relax. One way I have forced myself to do that in recent years is I try to draw. I try to sketch what I'm looking at. So I try to channel my inner Thomas Moran and draw a little bit what I'm looking at, because it forces me to look at the detail of what I'm looking at. And it's kind of fun. Now, I am not an artist. I cannot draw. So this is not something I'm going to draw and then hang up on my wall or anything like that, or show off. It's more just to force me to slow down and enjoy the moment. And I've done it with pen and paper, but I've also, in recent years, I've had an iPad, so I've taken my iPad with me to some of these places and sat down and sketched it. And I have an Apple Pencil, and so I'll just draw it out on my notepad on my iPad, and I can use different colors and different types of brush strokes and stuff like that. Again, this all sounds more fancy than it actually is, but it's fun. And I was doing this at Grand Teton this year, and a couple of ladies came up and saw me doing it and said, "Man, that's a cool idea. That's really fun." And then my son wanted to do it, so he sketched out something on the Grand Tetons, and so it was just fun. It's been kind of a fun little thing for us to do, and so I encourage you to give that a try. The second thing that I've done, or the second idea I have, here's an unusual idea for you. I saw this really cool gal on YouTube. Her name is the Painting Stoof, and she paints this landscape scenery. And on her website, you can upload a photo that you took, and she will paint it for you and send it to you. And this would be just the coolest thing to have on your wall in your home or your office after your vacation to Yellowstone. Instead of just kind of, again, it being buried on your phone, or even if you print off a photo that you took at Yellowstone, it's not quite the same magic, because everybody kind of has the same photos, and maybe your camera's not wonderful anyway and doesn't print real big prints. This is a cool idea, where you could have an actual work of art, just like Thomas Moran's work of art, hanging on your wall of your own picture. So I'll put a link to her information here in the description, and if you do decide to order from her, let her know that Matt from We're on the Rockies sent you. And I just think this is cool. She has she's just the cutest gal, and she has all these great paintings, so check her out even if you don't order something from her. Okay, there is your comprehensive guide to the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. I know it was really long, but I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a lot out of it. And if so, please, of course, click subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great trip to Yellowstone.